Hello and welcome to episode number 107 of James Bond Radio. My name's Tom Sears and I'm not joined by Chris Wright sadly this week, though he will be featuring in this week's episode, which is kind of fantastic. Now, in a change to our programming, we were going to do an MI6 mailbag episode this week, but we had something which, dare I say it, might be a little bit better than that. So we thought we'd do a little bit of a replacement and squeeze that into this week's episode. Now, who do we have on today's show? We have an interview with Mr. Rich Zakka. Now, who is Rich Zakka, you ask? I can hear you all asking me. And the answer to that question is he's only the grandson of Timothy Moxon, who played Strangways in Dr. No, right back at the beginning of the whole Bond movie saga. So he's got some cool stories for us about good old Strangways and some stories about him back during the war and stuff, and his adventures as a pilot and life in Jamaica and all that kind of stuff. If you read Matthew Parker's book GoldenEye, Where Bond Was Born, you'll really like this episode because there's it's from that same sort of world, so to speak, you know, the jet set in Jamaica back in the late 50s, early 60s, that kind of thing. So good stuff. Make sure you stick around for that because that's a cool little interview. Now, before we crack on, a couple of little things. Basically, Chris is hosting a special JBR meetup in the sort of Londonish, Pinewoodish area on the 16th to the 18th of September. Now, this is kind of a big deal, right? There's a lot going on, and there's some insane Bond movie locations he's going to visit, and some of the kind of core JBR family are going to be there, and they're going to hang out for the whole weekend. But everybody's welcome. If you want to tag along for one of the days, all three of the days, or a couple of the days, whatever you want to do, you're more than welcome. So I'm gonna read you the little kind of write up that Chris did over on the Facebook event page. So here it goes. For those who can make it, this is going to be an amazing 3-day extravaganza of all things Bond. Our first point of call will be at Blenheim Palace on Friday the 16th of September to watch the Luna Cinema outdoor screening of Spectre in the very location where Bond arrives to the Spectre meeting and where he and Mr. Hinks drive off in their sports cars. Oh, wonderful. Good stuff, eh? So actually it's an outdoor screening within Blenheim Palace, like exactly where Bond pulls in a DB10 and when he kind of escapes from the meeting and they drive off and stuff. It's going to be in that courtyard section of the palace, which is going to be amazing. So that's Friday the 16th of September, which is pretty cool. And then after that, the Saturday and Sunday will involve a tour de force of Bond location spotting around numerous locations west of London, including Stoke Poges from Goldfinger and Tomorrow Never Dies, and the fantastic Stoner Park from The Living Daylights. So we must say thank you to JBR listener Darren Noble for kind of compiling and organising the kind of whole weekend and all the locations and the planning and all that kind of stuff. But essentially, I'm going to give you a rundown of all the locations they're going to visit, which is pretty cool. Okay, so first up is Black Park, which features in Goldfinger a lot of the kind of the chases with Tilly Masterson and, you know, where she gets knocked down and all that kind of stuff. That's right next to Pinewood as well. You got Stoke Park, which is obviously where Bond and Goldfinger play their famous round of golf. You got St. Giles Church, which is the church from the very beginning of For Your Eyes Only, which is great, where he visits Tracy's grave. You've got the Royal Saracen's Head, that's from Thunderball, that's nearby. You've got Denham Quarry Lakes, which also featured in Thunderball. You've got Summerhouse Lane, which features in Goldfinger. You've got Chalfont Park House, which features in Thunderball, which I believe was Shrublands. That's very exciting, isn't it? So that's the Saturday. And then on the Sunday, you've got, where are we? The George and Dragon Pub, which featured in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. You've got Hurley Lock, which was in From Russia With Love, where he was romancing Sylvia Trench at the very beginning. You've got White Pond Farm, which featured in The Living Daylights, where old Necros does a bit of strangulation with his headphones. You've got Stoner Park, which is the safe house that they take Koskov to, where, you know, old Necros comes along, gets his milk bottles out. Lovely stuff. And that's kind of it. That's all of the locations they're going to be visiting. So there's some real top draw Bond location spotting to be had. And like we say, everybody's welcome. So if you've never tagged along to one of our meetups before, do it this time because it's going to be pretty amazing. I'm sadly not going to be there, but Chris is going to be there and a whole bunch of the JBR family are too. So if you want to tag along to, you know, one of those things, a couple of them, or hang around for the whole weekend, you're more than welcome. So the best thing to do is head on over to Facebook, our Facebook page. Just put James Bond Radio into the search box if you don't know it already, and scroll down. You'll see like the events on the bottom right hand side of the page, and it's called A Drive in the Country, which is obviously a For Your Eyes Only quote. Yes, so you can see all the details on there. You can get involved, and you can work out what's happening and find out where to meet everybody and all that kind of stuff. So that is September the 16th through the 18th. And if you're shy, don't worry. Everybody's super friendly, and everyone's up for a good time. So even if you don't know anybody and all that kind of stuff, feel free to just come along and have a good time, and you'll make some new friends. Lovely stuff. And in slightly less exciting news, but still quite exciting, there's an orchestral Bond concert at the South Bank Centre in London on September 30th. That's a Friday. And I'm going to be there. And some of the JBR family are going to be there as well. So if you fancy a little bit of orchestral Bond action, Friday, September 30th at the South Bank Centre, make sure you grab your tickets. I'm sure we'll have, we'll meet up in the bar for a bevy before and maybe afterwards as well. So if you fancy that and you're available, come and check it out. It'll be good. All right, then. So without any further ado, let's crack on and talk to Mr. Rich Zakka, grandson of Strangways himself, Mr. Timothy Moxon. Here it is.
Who are you?
My name's Bond. James Bond.
Bond.
James.
Bond, what do you think you're doing?
Keeping the British hand up, sir.
Welcome to James Bond Radio. News, reviews, and discussion of all things 007.
Pussy. As you can see, I have no problem with female authority.
Oh, pipe down, 007.
Do you expect me to talk?
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
So I'd just like to have a special guest on the show today. This is Mr. Rich Zakka, who is the grandson of Timothy Moxon, who played Commander John Strangways in Dr. No. So welcome to the show, Rich. How are you?
Thank you, Chris. Doing great. How about you?
Not too bad at all. And whereabouts are you calling from?
I'm actually in Connecticut, about an hour drive out of New York City.
Okay, well, it's looking quite nice behind you, looking quite tropical almost.
I wish it was more so.
Not quite Jamaican levels at the moment then.
No, not quite, but no. We're heading there.
Okay, well, I'm just telling the listeners that we received a brilliant email from yourself a few weeks ago, mentioning that, you'd listened to the show and that you happen to be the grandson of Timothy Moxon, as I mentioned, who played Commander John Strangways in Dr. No, which is absolutely amazing. As soon as I sort of read the email, both myself and Tom were like super excited, like this is so cool. And we just thought, well, how cool would it be to get you on the show and have a little chat to you about your grandfather?
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. He really was from a different era, a very special era, I think, on the north coast of Jamaica with the jet set back in the early 60s. And with his, being a World War II pilot in the RAF and then ending up being in the Bond role, he really, even, till modern day, kind of was somebody that you'd meet who you could tell he was from a different era, a very special era, and he carried that with him. And you really got more of an awe-inspiring celebrity presence from him than certain other people. I've been around several celebrities, and he just really was really a great character to be around.
What I love about that sort of era is these old school adventurers. It was at a stage in the world where not all of it had been explored. Going to Jamaica was a massive thing. Seeing it on the big screen was just, all these people have just come out of the war. It's grey, it's dreary. Suddenly they're seeing this life of colour in Jamaica. And to have people that were around who had experienced wartime life and then sort of hear, all their stories and everything like that, it's just, you just don't get that nowadays, do you?
No, not so much. I mean, thank goodness, I guess. There hasn't been, there's been wars, but nothing quite like World War II, I suppose. He, back then, obviously, like I mentioned, he was in the RAF. And they were so short on pilots that he was basically had 6 hours of instruction, and then they had him soloing on his own.
Wow.
And he was training on some really ancient looking aircraft. I mean, those World War II pilots were something from a different world almost. He was flying de Havilland Dragonflies, which almost, imitate what the Wright brothers planes look like. And later on, he ended up flying Halifax bombers in World War II. And his older brother actually flew Spitfires. But he was he was a definite character with a lot of stories. He, heading off to Jamaica, as you mentioned, was a big, it's sort of a lot of people ended up there sort of in the right time with the jet set. When, the Ian Fleming and Noel Coward, and then actually Matthew Parker's GoldenEye book really encapsulates what was going on very nicely in that period. But he really started out in England and as a London stage actor after the war. Tried the airline flying and didn't really go well with him. So he's just a very free-spirited World War II pilot, if you will. And ended up via Africa. They spent some time in Nigeria. He was working for Reynolds Aluminum back then, and then went off to Jamaica. And my mom, she was probably about 4 years old when they arrived around 1958, 1959, and it was a party on the North Coast. It was a really interesting time in Jamaican history because you had all these Brits that were just and people, not just Brits, but people from all over, that were partying it up a little bit on the North Coast. And, meanwhile, Jamaicans were kind of going about their business, working towards getting independence. But, and then you had this whole James Bond character show up on the scene via Ian Fleming. And it was just a really interesting time. And I don't think there's that many characters left from that era that had that experience that are still around today. My grandfather, he did some crop dusting back then. He was really, he enjoyed that much more than the rigidness of, say, the airline flying. But that he had previously done the London stage acting. So when Terence Young came down there, he ran into him in the Corley Manor and, did the little part as Strangways, which was the first man to get killed in a Bond film.
That's right. What I find fascinating is how certain things in life, it's almost like fate, isn't it? Certain things in life just happen, and there's no reason why or how they just happen. And just little moments like that can change a course of someone's life. And it's fascinating when you hear instances like that. And
truly.
And of course, with your grandfather, you mentioned he's probably the closest to a real life James Bond that you've ever met yourself. So
truly, I mean, I can see, I know you and Tom have read the novels, and so much of that is based on that time in Jamaica, or maybe even a little bit before that with Fleming. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't think that my grandfather fed any of that, obviously, because he came after the novels. But I will say that some of his stories, bush flying in Jamaica, and I'm a pilot myself, and I wouldn't ever brag about this, but he's crashed a few times, and not really his fault. I mean, it's, if you're single engine out over the mountains, back then mechanicals issues were more common. They would hang power lines at the approach ends of runways. I remember, I think he was landing at night. He crashed into some power lines. Thankfully, the power was turned off. They hadn't switched it on yet. Going into, I want to say it was either maybe Ken Jones on the east side of southeast side of the island, east side of the island. But yeah, no, I mean, he was definitely from a different league of flyers. I remember he used to tell us stories about, he was constantly, he'd actually take us flying around the island. He had an air taxi back later on in the day, more recently. And that's where I got the bug for flying. But he would take us flying around, and very often he'd be flying people around, and he'd point out Ian Fleming's house, and these tourists, that were new, visiting the island would be very impressed to see. Or I remember he would tell us one day he was flying over Noel Coward's house, and he saw Noel down next to the pool or something on the patio. And so he's like, oh, I'll put on a little air show for him. He was on his way to, I don't know if he might have been spraying bananas, or I don't know, maybe this was more his air taxi days. But so anyways, he started to do that, and he was doing some loops and turns and spins perhaps, and his seatbelt comes loose. And he nearly lost control of the airplane and almost spiraled the plane down into the Caribbean Sea outside of Noel Coward's house.
Wow.
He got control of it again naturally. And so later on, when he saw Noel, he was, Noel Coward in his very British way was saying to him, he was saying, Timothy, that really was the most amazing display of airmanship you showed us the other day. We really enjoyed it. And he's kind of, waved it off, saying, oh, you don't know the half of it.
Wow.
There was a lot of crazy. We'd be on the beach and on the, later years. I mean, and he would just come in buzzing the beach, and my mom would tell us, don't say anything because he might be disrupting the other, people on the beach there. But or other time we'd be on the balcony of a house that's kind of overlooking the water, maybe 100 feet up, and he kind of flies by, and we're like, oh, that's nice, and then he'll kind of go off in the distance, and he'll be kind of coming head on with the balcony of the house.
Wow.
I mean, literally, I would say literally less than 100 feet. And it was just a Cessna,
Yeah.
But he'd pull up at the last moment, giving us an air show. We have all this on VHS from probably 1987,
Wow.
So just, and really the life of the party. Just a very, not necessarily a partier, but just such a sharp wit. You always wanted to be around to hear what one-liner he would give out that have everyone roaring, and actually I remember one time he told me a story about being at a Bond event more recently, and I think he was out it might have been Long Beach, California, and they were on the Queen Mary, and he had made some comment with regards to, the last time I was on this boat, we were heading off to war, and something about, I wonder if the troops that are heading off to war in Iraq, feel some way or something like this. I wonder what they're going through. And basically it was meant to be a joke the way he said it, but I don't think it came off that way. And so there was complete stark silence afterwards. And George Lazenby, I guess, was sitting next to him. It kind of leans over and says, "That's what you call a cricket." A cricket? Yeah, when there's just crickets, you hear no laughter. Anyway,
That's amazing.
But,
That's amazing.
yeah, I mean, it's tough to paint the picture of someone from that era, but he was really the British gentleman. Very much an old school Jamaica guy. And I've spoken to several, Air Jamaica pilots that would have regarded him as a legend in Jamaican aviation history. But that era, it was a bit of a product of that era. Really cool time in Jamaica. And again, Matthew Parker's book was really interesting to read about that.
Yeah,
But,
it wasn't long ago I read Matthew Parker's Golden Eye, and like you mentioned, the parties and that time was almost like they were living as like kings in a land where anything goes, and it seemed they could just party, drink. It was just a place to escape everything else, really, wasn't it? And it just seemed like such an amazing time back then.
it would have been fun to be on the set of Dr. No, and I really you have to give it to Chris Blackwell. I mean, back then in 1960 it was, 1961, the location really is probably the best locations in any movie that's ever been filmed in Jamaica that I've seen. I know they filmed Live and Let Die, I think, with the Gators. The New Orleans scene was filmed down there, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, some of those places like Ocherias outside of with Ursula Andress, and some of those areas now are very touristy, and I don't think you could do it. So it's kind of nice to have those areas kind of captured in that wonderful film that was so Fleming, such a Fleming story, really.
So have you had a chance to go to those locations yourself at all? Is that something you do?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Jamaica. It was really almost a second home to me. I grew up in New York, but we would go down there and visit my granddad in Montego Bay, and we'd spend a lot of time in a place called Silver Sands, which might it's between Ocho Rios and Montego Bay on the north coast. Most beautiful beach in Jamaica, probably. I guess you call him my great uncle Oliver has a place called Moxon's outside of Ocho Rios. It's still there to this day. And yeah, so we traveled around the island. We go on tours out to Black River where they have the waterfalls. You see we go rafting on the Martha Brae with the bamboo rafts. So maybe not specifically where they filmed. I've never been to Golden Eye yet. I'd love to go at some point. But definitely, I've seen, I have to say, I've seen some of the influence that, I love reading the stories of Jamaican cooking from Fleming's perspective, talking about how Jamaican coffee is the best. Because I've yet to find anything better, in my opinion. It's gotten really expensive, of course. But,
I can imagine.
But, yeah, just, the talks about papayas and some of that. So, yeah, we'd be down there for entire summers from the time I was 2 years old till I was 18, basically. And just a wonderful place, beautiful island. It's a tropical paradise, of course.
That must have been quite a childhood, because I imagine you must have had some friends and you're just who were sort of, we're just hanging around for the summer. What are you up to? Oh, well, I'm off to Jamaica. I'm going to be flying in an aeroplane. I'm going to be, having a ball and all this. That must have been pretty amazing.
We were pretty fortunate to have family down there, and having my grandfather along was being down there was wonderful, and just such a character, such an influence on us. Again, we'd go flying into these little bush fields, and he was really a really good stick and rudder pilot. It's kind of funny. I took him flying later on in life and out of northern Florida where I was doing flight training. And, he was never one to be very critical, always had positive things to say. So if he had a critique about my flying back then, he would pass it on to my mom, who was me direct. But yeah, no, Jamaica was just a wonderful place. And, I can only imagine back in the 50s and 60s, what an interesting place it was. And, it's really interesting. I have to say that, the character of James Bond, how he kind of he came out of maybe Fleming's frustration a little bit of having the British Empire sort of shrinking, and him being the good guy that's kind of coming through, and I think it's nice that aspect of him is carried over to this era, because I think that it's a forgotten era if it wasn't for Bond.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. And, Fleming, was very friendly with my grandfather, and, they were just all characters down there, but yeah, I'm happy to be able to show my kids someday that, their grandfather was the first one to meet his maker or have a one-liner
That's it.
in a Bond film,
I mean, that's just right there. That is amazing. That is the first character to say anything, the first character to be killed, and basically his character sets in motion the whole film, doesn't it, Dr. No? So it's quite a seminal character, even though it's only on screen for like a short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, those early films really left such an imprint. Even to this day, I really like what they're doing, trying to return a little bit more to the Fleming-esque. I thought like Casino Royale was phenomenal as far as staying with the Fleming novel. And I think my grandfather would agree. I mean, back then there were doubts about Sean Connery before, obviously, the movie came out. But afterwards, my grandfather, it wasn't Bond if it wasn't Sean, kind of thing. And I think I could safely say that Sean Connery definitely fulfilled any expectation and more. He established it, and back then it was funny though, because I mean, you had everybody. It seems like there's these different hotspots in the world where everyone might be living it up, and back then it just happened to be Jamaica, 1960, and you had people like the Rolling Stones coming down later years, and I remember my grandfather had one story where he's flying Mick Jagger around, and he turns around, Mick Jagger was in the back, kind of smoking something, anyways, yeah, no. just seemed like that was the hot spot, and it still retains, Jamaica still retains very much that British imprint, I think.
And how in terms
It really
of
does.
Jamaica itself these days, how, with obviously independence several decades ago, what is the outlook between sort of the local Jamaicans and your Brits or your Americans or your tourists and people that go there? Is there any animosity, or is it okay, or what's the sort of general feeling like there?
Well, I think, my experience has been the Jamaican people really are lovely. I mean, it's a third world nation. I've been to a lot of islands, and it seems like all the islands have issues of one or another, one thing or another. It's their main. I'd say the main problem with them, the main issue they have is the debt. From my understanding, tourism is the main economy. It's become that way. They used to be able to ship out bananas and produce, but yeah, no, it's you have to know where you're going. It's in any island, really. I mean, the North Coast is still a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful place to go vacation, and it's some of the most natural beauty I've seen. I mean, I've been to a lot of islands, and Jamaica is not flat. It's very mountainous. It has this sort of volcanic Baltic rock that really keeps the humidity level down. You always have that nice cool ocean breeze, but in the evenings you have this nice, the way Fleming describes it in the novel is the Undertaker's wind, which comes down from the mountains, and you get a nice cool breeze from the hills in the evenings, which is lovely. And yeah, I mean, like I've said, we've been fortunate that we've been going to basically the same beach, for gosh. Well, I've been since I ever was born, basically. But I can tell you honestly, I've not been to a nicer beach, and I've traveled. So
that sounds really amazing. So, in terms of James Bond itself, have you always been a James Bond fan? And what was it like seeing your grandfather on the screen for the first time?
That's a good question. Actually, it's funny. I am surprised my parents let me watch Doctor No at such a young age, because at least my wife won't let my kids watch it quite yet, and they're almost 7 going on 8 actually. But it was I really got a kick out of seeing. It really gave me a perspective on. I'm glad I got to see it, because I looked at my grandfather in a different perspective, realizing that he came from an era where things were so glamorous and such a tropical setting, and just really made me maybe take notice a bit more. But yeah, it put the spotlight on Bond. I didn't really enjoy the novels till later in life, I would say. As a teen, I think I tried reading them early on. Didn't like them as much as I do now. But yeah, no, it was very cool seeing grandfather on the big screen, and not just that, but on such an important film. The longest running Bond film franchise there is. So
yeah, and I think it will continue to stay that way as well. I can't see it ending anyway.
I have to say, I think Daniel Craig is pretty amazing as Bond. He's doing a nice job.
He certainly is, definitely. Yeah. Now, you sent over a couple of pictures, which were fascinating. One of them was of a picture which we actually see in the film, which is the framed picture of your grandfather and John Kitzmiller, who played Quarrel, with a big marlin fish in between them. And now, how did that? Did your grandfather sort of take that as a souvenir? How has that been handed down? Do you know the story behind that?
That's a good question. I just know that whenever we would go see him, it was sort of hanging there. And on the back, I actually have it here with me.
Oh.
Literally, it says, "Hang it on the back of on the back of the picture. It says, "Hang it in the toilet." Signed T.M. Timothy Moxon. So
nice.
He ended up with it. It might have been even hanging at Tim Air, which was the air taxi he operates out of Montego Bay. It might have been hanging in the office there. He sort of passed down several things, some few books and pictures, and I ended up was the fortunate one to get the really probably the best prop from the film.
Nice.
I know he got to keep his suit,
Yeah. Oh, look.
but yeah, no, it was just one of those. It's pretty special memorabilia, I'd say. I mean, I'm tempted to almost give it to a museum if I wasn't so selfish.
I'd be selfish if I were you as well. Definitely. And there was another picture that I saw there. Do you mind holding that one up as well?
Yes. Yeah, this is an RAF picture. He was 17, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
And I think he actually might have somehow made it in the war right before he was actually legal to be in the war. He might have lied about his age.
Yeah. That's great.
Very patriotic in sort of the Fleming way, I guess you could say, in the old British way, which transpires to, which is, is a wonderful time. England saved the world in a lot of ways. I mean, it was pretty evil empire, if you will,
It was a
that
bit.
we were fighting against. Sink the Bismarck type of
Yeah.
days.
Definitely. Well, those are both fantastic pictures, so we'll show those for our listeners so they can have a look as well. Okay, so obviously, have you seen all of the Bond films that have been released?
Yes.
You have.
Yeah.
And do you have a favourite at all?
It's I am biased. I'll word it this way. I would say that if I were, since I'm biased, I would say Doctor No, because of the whole takes you back to Jamaica.
Yeah.
But if I was trying to be unbiased, I would say best film really had to have been Thunderball. Just a masterpiece. Really maintained the Fleming story, had a great villain, great girl, great locations. It's Bond in the Caribbean, which is really where I feel like he does belong for 50% of the movies, perhaps.
Yeah.
From Russia with Love was also wonderful, and Casino Royale was phenomenal, I thought, really, for a modern-day Bond film.
Those are all absolute bangers. They're all great. So I'll tell you what we'll do then. So after that question, I'll ask you a couple of quick fire questions so we know your favourite film. Do you have a favourite Bond book?
Again, heading to Jamaica, Live and Let Die, and being from New York, it does take place in the city a bit. It's just fun reading about Bond escaping Mr. Big's lair, heading downtown, and then ending up in Jamaica in the scuba or the underwater gear on his way to Mr. Big's lair, and the barracudas and the blood coming down. I would have to say Live and Let Die. There's some other really, really good ones, but like Casino would be a second favorite, I'd say, in that regard too.
Great one. Do you have a favourite actor who has portrayed James Bond?
Well, that would have to be Sean. But if it wasn't Sean, I would actually say Daniel Craig. If anyone besides Sean would be Daniel Craig for modern. I think it's gotten harder to play Bond, and I think he's got the physical aspect of it, but he's very panache, debonair, and has the comedy thing going. But it's a very serious world, and it's I think that he's able to pull off that sort of retro modern dynamic, and so I really thought he was very good. I was as skeptical as anyone about him in Casino Royale, but I think especially in Spectre and Casino, he's done very nicely, and so I would have to say him.
Yeah. Great answer. Do you have a Now this one might be tricky, and we can allow two answers for this. But do you have a favourite James Bond girl? Now you can
Bond
have
girl.
so you can have the one that sort of gets you all hot under the collar, and also you can have one that's your favourite Bond girl character, or if they're the same person, obviously that's fine as well. So any ideas with that?
Okay. That's a really interesting question. As far as favorite actress. Oof, that's such a hard one. It really is a hard one. I really would, I could go so many ways between Diana Rigg or Slandris, but I would go with Domino. I think her story is pretty interesting, and I think she was really well portrayed in Thunderball.
She's also exceedingly hot as well.
There is that as well. But I think she's and forgive me, I've actually forgotten the actress's name who plays her in Thunderball.
So Claudine Auger.
That's right, Claudine Auger. Yeah, I think she was well portrayed. She's physical from a Bond girl standpoint, as well as looks great in a dress and just very polished in that regard.
Right.
But yeah, and so Domino, and I don't know, it's Eva Green as Vesper Lind is pretty hard to. I think she's lovely.
Well, Tom and I are both big fans of both the Bond girls you just mentioned, so we'll definitely back you up on that.
Thank you.
Do you have a favourite James Bond theme song at all?
I really like probably like a lot of other people, the Shirley Bassey ones, but I'm gonna go with On Her Majesty's Secret Service theme song. I really love that.
So good.
Yeah, it burns. It's just such a good one.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Okay, just a couple more then. What would you say, obviously, your earliest memory of Bond is? Now, would that be watching Dr. No, or was there anything else that sort of brought you into it? Do you remember at all?
Yeah, it really had to be the Strangways scene with the three blind mice. Obviously one of them was my grandfather's dentist. But I would say that was really the scene that sort of imprinted. We also had Thunderball back then. Maybe that's also, the opening scene to Thunderball was imprinted on my early memory. The jetpack and, Sean Connery offering his condolences with his fist. But no, I would say those scenes probably. Yeah.
And would you have a favourite scene in the entire series at all? That's a tricky one.
Yes, it is, because there's so many there's so many different potential aspects of that. I'm gonna have to go with. I love the Casino Royale scene where he's poisoned at the card table. And in the book, actually, I think someone has like a gun to Bond's back while he's playing his hand, and they poison him in the film, and he goes in, he throws up in the bathroom, and then he's going out, and Vesper Lind kind of plugs him in, helps him, he changes his shirt, comes back and beats the number Chiffre.
Yeah.
But I would go with that one. I think that was a cool scene. Really cool scene. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So our final question then, Rich. What would you like to see out of Bond 25?
Oh, well, I would like to see, first of all, Daniel Craig do at least 2 more. I really would like to see that. I love the dynamic with him and the new Blofeld. I think it's the whole. There's some controversy, obviously, that they came from the same place, but I think it lends the Octopussy story from the novels to the film in a way that brings back Blofeld pretty nicely. So I would say that I'd like to see Bond and Blofeld. I'd like to see Craig as Bond come back for 2 more films, and I'd like to see Blofeld not die in the next film. I don't know how they're going to get him out of prison, but I think I'd like to see him around. I'm doing bad with names today. Christoph Waltz. Yes, I'd like to see him for 2 more films. Maybe throw a Dr. No or Goldfinger type character into the next one, and keep him out of it. But I want to see that. I want to see him last a little longer.
That would be great.
I think they will. It seems like they reset the series. So.
Yeah, I think if Daniel stays on for 1 or 2 more, I can't see it going any other way. So fingers crossed, that's what we get.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. There we are.
Yeah. No, and they, like I said, they reset the series, and it's just really it's nice to see them kind of going retro. And I mean, you've seen all these other movies where Batman. You've seen how many different people in modern day play the Joker, or I think it's not an inappropriate time to bring back Blofeld.
No, definitely not.
They did it really nicely with Spectre, I thought. So
yeah, cool. Well, there we go. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe 2018, perhaps. We'll have to.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, as
I'm also looking forward to more James Bond radio.
Oh, you're too kind. Thank you, Rich. Thanks very much. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and fascinating
Thank
to
you.
hear. So fascinating to hear all about your grandfather and just getting a glimpse of the Jamaica back in that day and everything like that. And it's been
My
an
pleasure.
absolute
Thank you.
pleasure. A pleasure on our side at all. So thanks once again, and hopefully continue to enjoy the podcasts, and good luck for everything else with your flying in the future.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Appreciate it, and all the best to you and Tom.
All right, take care. Cheers.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Okay, how cool was that? Really, really good to hear from Rich there. Some nice little stories and all that kind of stuff. And if you watched on YouTube, you'll have seen those photos he had of his granddad on the wall and all that kind of stuff, which is pretty cool. But there we go, going right back to the very beginning of the whole Bond on the silver screen world, which is always good fun, good stuff. Okie dokie then. So just to sign off for today, Chris and I are going to take a break through September because I've got some traveling to do and Chris has got some other bits and bobs on. So we're going to have a little bit of time off, but we will be back in October with all the news from the Bond Stars event at Pinewood, which is coming up soon, and a load of other fun stuff as well. So if you're going to miss us, why not take the opportunity to listen to some of the back catalogue? We've got, way over 107 episodes. Even though this is episode 107, we actually made way more than that with some of the bonus episodes and some of the extra interviews and the 30 Days of Spectre and all that kind of stuff. And that is what you could do. You could perhaps go back throughout the month of September and listen to the 30 Days of Spectre again and get a little bit of JBR in your rolls every single day. And then before you know it, we'll be back in October. So why don't you go and do that? Lovely stuff. All right then, I will see you soon. Chris and I will be back in October for some more JBR goodness. We'll see you then. Take care, everybody. Bye.